bright smile. "Mom, are you enjoying the apartment I bought you?" he asked. I lowered my voice. "Sweetheart, I'm living in the garage." The wine glass slipped from my daughter's hand and shattered. The candles on my cake flickered, casting long shadows across the small space my son proudly called my apartment. 65 candles for 65 years, glowing in a converted garage that still smelled faintly of metal and old paint. "Make a wish, Mom," Blaine said, flashing a grin worth a magazine cover. His designer suit probably cost more than I'd spent on food in half a year. Beside him, my daughter Celine tapped her manicured nails on her glass, her eyes darting to her phone every few minutes. "This is lovely," I managed, forcing a smile. The concrete floor was cold beneath the thin rug I'd bought at a yard sale. Blaine reached across the table, his wedding band catching the light. "Mom, you know how much I love you. I just wanted you to have everything you need, everything I need." I glanced around at the narrow cot, the single hot plate, the tiny heater that barely worked in winter. The lone window looked out on an alley where garbage trucks rumbled before dawn. "Blaine," I whispered, "I live in the garage." Silence. Red wine spread across the gray floor like a slow-moving shadow. Celine's eyes gave her away. This wasn't surprise. It was recognition. Blaine's voice cracked. "No, Mom. This is the apartment. The garage apartment. It's separate from the main house." "Honey, really look." I pointed to the exposed pipes, the oil stains, the garage door hidden behind a tapestry to keep out the cold. "The realtor..." His words faded as he finally saw what I'd been living with for 3 years. "You never said anything," he murmured. "I didn't want to seem ungrateful," I admitted. "You were so proud when you handed me the keys." I thought this was what you believed I deserved." The room went still. Only Celine's shallow breathing broke the quiet. "The heating bills," Blaine said suddenly. "I've been paying for heat here." "High bills." My chest tightened. "Those aren't for this space." "There's no central heat. The bills you pay are for the main house." "The main house?" His voice barely carried. Celine finally spoke, cool and sharp. "The main house is empty, Blaine. It's been empty since Mom moved in here." The look that passed between them told me everything. She thought she'd hidden everything. She was sure her brother would never find out. "Celine." Blaine's voice tightened, a thread of confusion and something darker slipping in. "You handle all the property management. You promised you were keeping Mom comfortable. You said you were checking on her." My daughter rose slowly, brushing invisible dust from her designer dress. "I have been checking on her," she said evenly. "She seems perfectly fine." "Don't you, Mom?" The question hung in the room like a challenge. For 3 years, I'd played along, smiling and pretending that a cold garage counted as a home. I'd convinced myself that love from my children came with conditions I had to accept. But when I met Celine's steady, calculating gaze, something inside me cracked. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a mix-up. "How long have you known?" My voice stayed calm, steadier than I felt. "Known what?" she asked, eyes flicking away just for a heartbeat. "How long have you known I've been living in a garage while your brother believed he was paying for a real apartment?" The candles had burned down to pools of wax. The birthday cake sat untouched. From the nightstand, a photo of my grandson smiled at me. A boy I barely knew, because visits were always too complicated. Blaine stared at his sister, the puzzle pieces finally sliding into place. "Celine," he whispered. I already knew the truth. Her squared shoulders, the defiant tilt of her chin, they told me everything. That night ended with no answers. Blaine left shaken, Celine icy and composed. I sat alone on my narrow cot, thin blanket pulled tight, letting memories I'd tried to bury come rushing back. It began when Blaine was 18 and Celine 16. Harold had been gone 2 years, and the life insurance money was nearly spent. I worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves by day, babysitting on weekends, yet it was never enough. Then Blaine's Harvard acceptance letter arrived, a dream none of us had dared to imagine. "Mom, I can take out loans," he said, but I saw the worry in his eyes. "No," I told him, "you'll graduate free of debt." To keep that promise, I sold our beloved family home, the place where we danced in the kitchen, where the door frames still held pencil marks of both children's growth. After paying the mortgage and Harold's medical bills, there was barely enough for Blaine's tuition and a small apartment for Celine and me. It's just until Blaine graduates, I assured her while we packed our lives into boxes. Celine was furious. At 16, she understood what we were losing, but not why. All my friends live in real houses, she shouted. I'm embarrassed to bring anyone here. I worked extra shifts to cover her senior year. Prom dress, photos, graduation party, while I lived on peanut butter sandwiches. When Blaine graduated summa cum laude, job offers lined up like bright doors to a future I'd prayed for. Mom, let me help now, he said in his cap and gown. I'll take care of both of you. And he did. His career skyrocketed. Partner in 5 years, his own firm in 10. By 35, he was worth more than I could imagine. But somewhere in those years, Celine stepped quietly between us. At first it seemed harmless, moving to a city, taking a marketing job, offering to help with family details. Blaine's overwhelmed, she'd tell me. I handle things so he can focus on work. Those details, I realize now, included me. When I first struggled to keep up with rent, it was Celine who softly suggested, maybe you need something more suitable for a woman your age, Mom. When I mentioned how hard it was to pay for my medication, she promised she'd talk to Blaine. When I admitted how lonely it felt living alone, she vowed to find a solution that works for everyone. That solution turned out to be the garage. One afternoon, she arrived at my old apartment with a set of keys and a bright smile. Blaine found you the perfect place, she announced. No rent, no utilities. Everything is handled. I was touched. My successful son had thought of me. Why would I doubt my own daughter? She walked me through the space quickly, pointing out charming, exposed brick and the great location. It's perfect for you, Mom, she said. Simple, easy to maintain. Blaine is thrilled to give you this. I trusted her, of course I did. But now, sitting in this cold garage at 65, I saw the pattern. Every time Blaine tried to do more for me, Celine intercepted. The heating bills he proudly paid, the ones meant for this address, were for the empty main house. Had she told him I lived there and pocketed the difference? My phone buzzed. A text from Blaine. Mom, I need to understand what happened. Can we talk tomorrow? Before I could answer, another message flashed. I hope you're happy. You've upset Blaine terribly with your dramatics. Dr. Amidek's 3 years in the garage? I set the phone aside and faced the small mirror above my makeshift sink. The woman looking back with gray hair she cut herself to save money. Clean but worn clothes and eyes finally awake. For 3 years, I told myself this was temporary, that Blaine was just busy, that Celine was simply protecting her brother's schedule, that I should be grateful for any shelter I received. That was a story built on someone else's agenda, resentment dressed as family management. The truth had finally surfaced, and with it came something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Another buzz. Blaine, I'm coming over tomorrow morning. We need to fix this. I smiled for the first time in months. Yes, we did, but maybe not in the way he imagined. Blaine arrived at 8, hair tousled, expensive clothes wrinkled from a sleepless night. He stepped inside, eyes wide as they took in the space heater, the hot plate, the narrow cot. Mom. His voice cracked. How did I not know? I poured him cheap coffee from my little hot plate. He drank it without a word. You trusted Celine, I said quietly. And she did handle things. Just not the way you thought. But the bills, he said, rubbing his temples. I've been paying for heating, electricity, property maintenance. Where was the money going? I'd spent the night asking myself the same question. The main house, I said. The one sitting empty while I've lived out here. She told you I preferred this independence, didn't she? Blaine nodded slowly. She said the garage was just for storage. That you loved the freedom of the main house. My heart ached for him. For all his business success, he'd been misled as completely as I had. She's been managing your generosity, I said gently, redirecting it to her own plans. His voice was barely a whisper. But why? Before I could answer, a car door slammed outside. Through the small garage window, I spotted Celine's silver BMW pulled in behind Blaine's car. Of course she'd come. Damage control. Blaine, are you in there? Her voice carried that practiced sweetness she used when she wanted something. I brought breakfast. She stepped inside, balancing an expensive bakery bag, wrapped in a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than I spend on food in 3 months. Her smile froze when she saw us sitting together in heavy silence. Well, this looks intense, she said with a forced laugh. I thought we could have a nice breakfast and clear up this silly misunderstanding. Sit down, Celine, Blaine said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard. She perched on the edge of my narrow cot. carefully arranging her coat so it wouldn't touch the rough blanket. "Look, I know Mom got a little emotional last night," she said lightly. "You know how she can be. Sometimes she exaggerates things when she wants attention." The casual cruelty made my chest tighten, but Blaine's reaction was swift. "Exaggerates?" He gestured around the concrete walls. "She's been living in a garage for 3 years while I've been paying for her to live in a house." For a split second, Celine's polished mask slipped, revealing something cold beneath. "The main house needed extensive work," she said quickly. "Plumbing, electrical, foundation. You know how these older properties are. I didn't want to bother you with the details, so I had Mom stay here while we handled the renovations." "What renovations?" Blaine demanded. I watched my daughter lie as smoothly as breathing, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about money. "Show him the house, Celine," I said quietly. Her head snapped toward me. "What?" "Show your brother the house he's been paying to maintain." "Let him see these renovations." "Mom, that's not necessary." "Show me the house," Blaine cut in, his tone like ice. 20 minutes later, we stood before the main house, a beautiful property in an upscale neighborhood, exactly the kind of home a devoted son would choose for his mother. Blaine unlocked the door and stepped inside. The interior gleamed. Hardwood floors shone like glass. Fresh flowers graced polished tables. The kitchen was modern, immaculate, and fully stocked with imported cheeses, premium meats, and enough food to feed a family for weeks. Upstairs, bedrooms were furnished with high-end linens and tasteful decor. "This is where you thought I was living," I told Blaine softly. His voice trailed off as he opened the refrigerator, eyes narrowing at the bounty inside. "Who lives here?" I already knew. "I do," Celine said, lifting her chin. "Sometimes. When Marcus and I need space." Marcus, her husband of 15 years, earned a comfortable salary, but nothing close to Blaine's. "You've been living in the house I bought for Mom," Blaine said, each word a quiet blade. "I've been paying to maintain it." "Someone had to make sure it was cared for," she replied coolly. "Mom couldn't handle a place this size. So you decided she should live in the garage instead." "It's perfectly adequate for one person," she shot back, and she seemed fine with it. The lies were collapsing, but Celine doubled down, her voice rising. "You want the truth?" "Fine. Mom has been a burden for years, always needing something, always some crisis. I was protecting you, Blaine, handling her so you could focus on your business." "Protecting me?" Blaine stared, stunned. "Yes. Do you think it's easy managing her constant complaints, doctor visits, medications, loneliness? I've been dealing with all of it so you wouldn't have to." I finally saw her clearly. "You've been intercepting," I said, the pieces locking into place. "When Blaine tried to call, when he wanted to visit, when he planned surprises, you blocked him." Her silence was confirmation. "The Christmas present," Blaine said suddenly, his eyes darkening. "Last year I ordered an expensive heating system for Mom. I told you to have it installed here. She never mentioned receiving it." "Because I never received it," I said evenly. "Where is it, Celine?" Blaine's voice sharpened. "Mom's place didn't need that level of heating," she answered quickly. "I had it installed here instead, for when she visits." "When she visits," Blaine's voice cracked. "This is supposed to be her home." The room fell silent, the truth echoing louder than any accusation. Years of hidden resentment, manipulation, and quiet endurance now stood exposed, impossible to deny. I thought of all the things that had never reached me, the care packages Blaine said he sent, the medical appointments he thought were arranged, the grocery deliveries he believed arrived each week. Every single gesture of love had been filtered through Celine and quietly erased. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady. "How long have you been taking from both of us?" "I haven't taken anything," she snapped. "I've been managing family resources. Mom doesn't need much, and Blaine has more money than he can spend. I was making sure nothing went to waste." Waste. The word hit like a slap. That's what she thought caring for her own mother was, a waste. Blaine turned toward the garden outside, the one he'd paid to have manicured, believing I enjoyed its flowers. "I need to understand something," he said quietly. "Did you ever tell Mom about the trust fund?" My breath caught. "What trust fund?" Celine's face went pale. "The fund I set up 3 years ago," Blaine said, still staring out the window. $50,000 a year for Mom's living expenses and health care. I asked you to explain it and help her access the money. Celine, please tell me you told her." The silence stretched until it roared. In that silence, I understood everything. She hadn't just stolen my home. She'd stolen the security Blaine wanted for me, leaving me to survive on a small social security check while she lived in comfort. "Celine," Blaine said, his voice like a blade. "Where is the money?" Her face flickered, defiance, fear, calculation, before settling into brittle anger. "You don't understand the costs of managing all this," she said, waving a hand around the immaculate house. "Property taxes, maintenance, coordinating Mom's care. Do you have any idea how much time I spend handling her appointments and prescriptions?" "Stop," I said, my voice cutting through hers. "Just stop." She spun on me. "You're calling me a liar after everything I've done for this family?" "What appointments?" I demanded. "I haven't seen a doctor in over a year because I couldn't afford the copays." "What prescriptions?" "I've been splitting my pills to make them last." "What care coordination, Celine?" Color drained from her face, but she rallied. "You never told me you were struggling." "If you'd just communicated better." "I did tell you," I said, the memory sharp as glass. "I called last winter when I couldn't afford my blood pressure medication. I texted when the heater broke and I was freezing. I asked for help with groceries when my check was late. You said the family was going through a tight financial period." Blaine's head snapped around, eyes dark. "Tight financial period?" "Celine, I gave you access to a $25,000 emergency fund for Mom, refreshed every year. That money was for real emergencies," she shot back. "Not every little complaint Mom had. Every little complaint. Freezing in winter. Skipping heart medicine. A little complaint. You've always been dramatic," she added. "Always looking for attention." The casual cruelty was breathtaking. But what hurt most was the realization that this was how she'd always seen me. As a burden. As an inconvenience. As someone whose needs were suspect by default. Blaine pulled out his phone and began calling. First his accountant, then his lawyer. His voice low and sharp, ordering audits and reviews of every account. Celine's bravado faltered. "You can't do this to me," she hissed, glancing between us. "I'm your daughter. Family doesn't destroy family over money." "You're right," I said quietly. "Family doesn't. But you stopped being family the day you decided I was worth less than the care meant for me." "I kept you safe," she argued. "I kept you housed." "You're acting like I threw you out." "You kept me in a garage," I said evenly, "while you lived in my house, spent the money meant for me, and told your brother I was fine." I paused, meeting her eyes. "But that's not the worst part, is it?" She froze. "The worst part," I continued, "is that you enjoyed it. You enjoyed having that power, deciding how much love and care I deserved. Every time Blaine asked about me, you controlled the story." "That's not true," she whispered, but the certainty was gone. Her voice trembled, the certainty gone. "When I called you in tears because I was lonely," I asked quietly, "did you ever tell Blaine? When I asked if he could visit, did you pass the message along? When I wondered why he seemed distant, did you admit you were screening every call?" Blaine ended his phone conversations and turned to us. His face was stone, but his eyes carried pain. "The trust fund is empty," he said. "Every penny. The emergency fund and the medical account, too." "That money was being used appropriately," Celine insisted, but her voice wavered. "On what?" Blaine demanded, his tone rising. "Designer clothes? Cars? Vacations? Mom has been surviving on $800 a month, while you spent $50,000 a year, meant for her care." "I have expenses," she shot back. "I have obligations." "You have more money than you could ever spend, and you begrudge me?" "Begrudge you?" Blaine's voice cracked like a whip. "You stole from our mother. You left her in poverty while you lived off the funds meant for her. She doesn't need much." Celine's voice turned shrill. "Look at her. She's perfectly fine living simply. Some people are just low maintenance." The words landed like physical blows. Low maintenance. As if decades of sacrifice, years of putting my children first, proved I deserved less. As if quiet endurance meant I required less love, less care, less dignity. "Get out." My voice was soft but final. Both of them froze. "Celine, get out of my house." She gave a brittle laugh. "Your house?" "This is Blaine's house. Actually," Blaine said, his voice deadly calm. "As of today, the deed will be transferred to Mom, along with every account that should have been hers from the beginning." Celine's face drained of color. "You can't do that. I have nowhere to go. Marcus and I are separated. I don't have anywhere else." "You should have thought of that before you took from the person who gave you everything," Blaine replied. I watched my daughter realize she had no leverage left. No more control of the story. And that's when her true self emerged. Fine, she spat. You want honesty? I'm glad I kept you away from Blaine. You'd have called him constantly, demanding attention, making him feel guilty for being successful. You're needy. You drain everyone around you. The words might once have shattered me, but not now. Now I understood that my suffering had been manufactured by her greed. You're right about one thing, I said, standing tall. I am needy. I need respect. I need honesty. I need to be treated like a human being who deserves dignity. And since you can't give any of that, you're right. We're done. Celine stared at me as if I'd become someone she didn't know. In a way, she was right. The woman who'd accepted crumbs and called them kindness no longer existed. I want you out of this house by the end of the week, I said firmly. And I never want to see you again. Mom, you don't mean that. I'm your daughter. No, I said, feeling the truth settle deep inside. A daughter doesn't do what you've done. You're a stranger who shares my DNA. She turned to Blaine, desperate. Blaine, you can't let her do this. I'm your sister, and she's my mother, he said quietly. The mother who sold her home to send me to college. The mother who worked 3 jobs to give us everything. The mother who deserved better from both of us. Celine's composure cracked at last. This is all her fault, she screamed, pointing at me. She made herself a martyr. Always sacrificing, always suffering. She made us feel guilty for having good lives. She did this to herself. The accusation cut deep because it carried a grain of truth. I had sacrificed too much. I had taught my children, by example, that my needs came last. But that truth didn't excuse her choices. You're right, I said softly. I taught you that my needs didn't matter. But you had a choice. You could have honored those sacrifices. You could have cared for me in my later years the way I cared for you in your youth. Instead, you chose to take. The room fell silent. For the first time, I felt no fear, only clarity. I walked to the window, staring out at the garden I should have been tending for 3 years. Instead, my own daughter had decided that my willingness to sacrifice meant I should keep sacrificing forever. When I turned back, Celine's eyes were wet, but with anger, not remorse. I'll contest the deed transfer, she warned. I'll prove you're incompetent. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Blaine stepped forward. For the first time all morning, his presence felt dangerous. If you try to hurt her again, he said, voice like ice, you'll find out exactly how much power I have. Don't test me. Something in his tone made Celine flinch. She grabbed her purse and backed toward the door. This isn't over, she hissed. But as I watched her leave, I realized that, for me, it finally was. 2 weeks later, I sat in the kitchen I'd only ever dreamed of using. Granite counters, a professional-grade stove, sunlight on polished wood floors. The contrast was surreal after years of a hot plate and a mini fridge. But the biggest change wasn't the house. It was my relationship with my son. Blaine had taken a leave from his company, something I'd never thought possible. He visited every day, sometimes to help with paperwork, updating doctors, government agencies, sometimes just to share coffee and a quiet breakfast. We're learning how to be family again, he said one morning. All those times I called Celine instead of calling you, I should have known something was wrong. You never asked for anything. That should have been a red flag. I reached for his hand. You trusted your sister. That's not a flaw, but I need you to understand something. He looked up. I trained you both to see me as someone who needed nothing, I said. When you were in college and worried about money, what did I tell you? That you were fine. That I shouldn't worry. And when Celine was overspending in her early career, you helped her and said it was temporary. And when you offered to help me later, that you didn't really need it. He paused, realization dawning. You taught us that loving you meant leaving you alone. I thought I was being a good mother, I said softly, teaching independence, strength. But Celine took that lesson and twisted it. Before he could reply, the doorbell rang. A young woman with dark hair stood on the porch, shifting a manila envelope from hand to hand. Mrs. Holloway, she asked when I opened the door. I'm Jennifer Martinez, a private investigator. May I come in? Blaine and I exchanged a wary glance. We'd heard nothing from Celine since that day, though I'd expected some sort of retaliation. Jennifer sat in the living room, declining coffee. I've been hired by Marcus Chen, she said, Celine's husband. He's filing for divorce and believes your daughter has been hiding assets. What does that have to do with us? Blaine asked. Jennifer opened her envelope and laid a stack of documents across the coffee table. Bank statements, investment summaries, property records. This, she said, pointing to one statement, is a savings account in your name, Mrs. Holloway. Are you aware of it? I stared at the paper. The balance showed nearly $40,000. I've never seen this account before. It was opened 3 years ago, Jennifer explained, with Celine listed as the secondary account holder. Regular deposits were made, but no withdrawals. Blaine leaned forward, jaw tightening. What kind of deposits? Social Security overpayments, Medicare reimbursements, and... Jennifer slid another document forward. What appears to be proceeds from a life insurance policy. My heart stopped. What life insurance policy? Your late husband, Harold, she said gently. He had a small policy through his work. When he passed, there was apparently confusion about the beneficiary information. The room went silent. Another secret. Another layer of betrayal. This one reaching back to the very day Harold died. The insurance company has been trying to reach you for 3 years, Jennifer said. I stared at the papers, confused. But Harold died 15 years ago. His life insurance paid out back then. That's how I kept us afloat. This was a different policy, Jennifer explained. A retirement benefit that continued after his death. During a merger, the file was misplaced. When they finally found it, the address they had was outdated. My stomach tightened. So where did the money go? To this account, she said, sliding a statement across the table. Opened by someone claiming to be your legal representative. Her voice stayed careful, professional. The signature cards show your daughter's name. Blaine leaned over the documents, his face darkening with every page. She's been collecting money meant for Mom for 3 years? It appears so, Jennifer said. But here's the surprising part. She never spent a cent. Every deposit just sat there, gaining interest. I tried to comprehend it. Why would she take the money and never use it? I think she was saving it for something specific, Jennifer answered gently. Based on papers we found in her files, it looks as though she planned to claim you were incompetent and needed a guardian. Having an untouched account in your name would help her prove she was responsibly managing your affairs. The room seemed to tilt. She was preparing to have me declared unfit, I whispered. It's possible, Jennifer said. She kept notes describing what she called concerning behaviors. Isolation, poor decision-making, inability to manage finances. Blaine shot to his feet, pacing to the window. The garage, he said, his voice tight. She kept Mom in the garage to create evidence that she couldn't live independently. And my calls for help, I added, sick with realization. Every time I asked her about doctor visits or finances, she recorded it as proof I was confused. Jennifer nodded. Mr. Chen, her husband, told me there are also records of conversations with elder care attorneys in private facilities. The manipulation ran deeper than I'd imagined. Celine hadn't just stolen money. She had been building a case to steal my freedom, but she never followed through, Blaine said. No, Jennifer agreed. And based on the timeline, I think I know why. She pulled out another document. 3 months ago, Celine hired a private investigator to examine your finances, Mr. Holloway. I believe she was trying to learn how much control she could gain over your assets if she became your mother's guardian. Blaine went very still. She was planning to go after my money, too. It's possible, Jennifer said. In many states, a guardian can request financial support from other family members. I sank back, overwhelmed. My own daughter hadn't just been stealing. She had been preparing to erase my independence and perhaps even my relationship with my son. Jennifer continued. There's one more discovery. The reason Mr. Chen hired me, Celine has been moving funds into accounts using your maiden name, Mrs. Holloway, creating a financial profile to make it appear she was acting as your legal representative all along. Identity theft, Blaine said grimly. Jennifer nodded. Mr. Chen believes she planned to claim significant assets in their divorce settlement, presenting those accounts as proof she controlled your estate. I looked around the beautiful house, my house, thinking of the cold garage where I'd lived for 3 lost years. The scope of Celine's scheme was staggering. What happens now? I asked. The $40,000 in that account is legally yours, Jennifer said. And with this evidence, prosecutors could pursue charges. Financial elder abuse, identity theft, fraud. Blaine sat beside me, his voice steady. Mom, this is your choice. But she needs to face consequences. I thought about the woman who'd raised me to believe that loyalty meant silence. The years I'd spent making excuses for Celine's chill. The medical care I'd skipped, the dignity I'd surrendered. All because I believed family meant accepting whatever treatment you were given. For the first time in decades, I realized I didn't have to accept anything ever again. 6 months later, my garden was finally my own. I stood among the roses I'd planted myself, deadheading blooms as morning sunlight spilled across the beds. The simple pleasure of soil under my fingernails felt like a luxury I'd forgotten. The legal case had moved quickly once the evidence surfaced. Celine pled guilty to financial elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud. The judge was unsparing. This defendant didn't just steal money. She stole dignity, autonomy, and peace of mind from those who trusted her. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to repay not only me, but 2 other elderly clients she had quietly targeted. I attended the sentencing, not for revenge, but to witness the end of the story. Celine looked smaller somehow in her prison uniform. She glanced at me once, an expression that might have been regret or simple anger at being caught. I nodded once in return. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Biologically, she would always be my daughter, but the relationship I'd spent 65 years trying to preserve was over. The hardest part wasn't the court case or the public attention. It was learning to live without the constant background anxiety that had ruled me for so long. The fear that one crisis could send me into poverty or illness. Now my finances were secure, my independence intact, and my bond with Blaine stronger than ever. For the first time in decades, I could plan beyond the next month. I enrolled in a Master Gardener program at the community college. I joined a book club. I even began dating. A quiet, gentle courtship with Robert, a retired teacher I met in gardening class. We took slow walks through botanical gardens, shared stories of our children and grandchildren, and sipped coffee on cool mornings. Yes, grandchildren. That was an unexpected gift. Blaine had been married for 8 years to Sarah, a warm, quick-laughing pediatric nurse. I'd only met her briefly at their wedding, an introduction Celine had carefully minimized. Sarah was now 7 months pregnant with my first grandchild. I feel awful that we didn't include you more, Sarah told me during one of our dinners. Celine always made it sound like you wanted to be left alone. I started to make the old excuses, but Blaine gently cut in. Celine lied about a lot, he said simply. We're starting over, and we were. They brought me into everything, doctor visits, nursery planning, baby shopping. I was finally part of my son's life in a way I'd never been allowed before. One afternoon, as we assembled a crib, Blaine admitted, I keep thinking about all the conversations we should have had. All the times I called Celine instead of you. We're having them now, I reminded him, and he smiled. That morning in the garden, I wiped my hands and answered the door, expecting Robert with our takeout lunch. Instead, a young woman stood on the porch holding an infant carrier. Mrs. Holloway, she asked softly. I'm Amanda Chen, Marcus's sister. My heart clenched, a ripple of old history stirring. Marcus was Celine's ex-husband, and I'd learned during the court proceedings that they had a child together. This is Emma, Amanda said softly, tilting the carrier so I could see the sleeping toddler inside. I caught my breath. Dark curls, chubby cheeks, a trace of Celine's features, but something gentler, untouched by bitterness. She couldn't have been more than 18 months old. Marcus wanted you to meet her, Amanda continued. He said you have a right to know your granddaughter, no matter what happened with Celine. My throat tightened. How is she? She's doing well. Marcus has full custody. He's a good father. Amanda paused, then held out an envelope with my name, written in a careful, unfamiliar hand. He asked me to give you this. May I hold her? I whispered. Amanda smiled and lifted Emma into my arms. The little girl stirred, blinking awake, and studied me with solemn, dark eyes. Hello, sweetheart, I said softly. I'm your grandma, Janine. Emma considered this information as if weighing it, then reached out a small hand to touch my face. After Amanda and Emma left, I sat in the quiet living room and unfolded Marcus's letter. Dear Mrs. Holloway, I want you to know I had no idea what Celine was doing to you. If I had known, I would have stepped in immediately. I hope you'll consider being part of Emma's life. She deserves a grandmother who will treat her with kindness and respect. Celine will have supervised visits when she's released, but Emma needs family she can trust. Some of Celine's behavior towards you makes more sense to me now. She was controlling and emotionally abusive to both Emma and me. We're in therapy, learning healthier patterns. If you're willing, we'd love to have you be part of our healing process. Sincerely, Marcus. I folded the letter and sat for a long time, thinking about patterns and choices, how pain can echo through generations until someone decides to break the chain. Celine had inherited my willingness to sacrifice and twisted it into something self-serving. But Emma didn't have to inherit that darkness. She could grow up knowing that love never demands the loss of dignity or autonomy. That evening, Blaine and Sarah came for dinner. Sarah, now moving carefully in the final stage of pregnancy, insisted on helping me cook. I have some news, I said as we chopped vegetables. I have another grandchild. I told them about Amanda's visit, Marcus's letter, and the serious-eyed little girl who had reached for my face. How do you feel about it? Sarah asked gently. I thought for a moment. Hopeful, I said at last. That little girl deserves better than the legacy Celine would leave her. Maybe I can help with that, Blaine nodded. You've always known how to raise children who understand love. I made mistakes with you and Celine, I admitted. I taught you both that my needs didn't matter. Celine used that lesson to justify cruelty. You used it to justify distance. Neither was healthy. So what will you teach Emma? Sarah asked. I smiled, picturing Emma's curious gaze. That she's valuable exactly as she is. That people who love her will show up consistently. That asking for help isn't weakness, and giving help isn't sacrifice. It's love in action. After dinner, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Sarah rested one hand on her rounded belly while Blaine, phone set aside, listened to the evening birdsong. I've been thinking about forgiveness, I said quietly. Not forgiving Celine. I may never get there. Forgiving myself. For what? Blaine asked. For all the years I believed I was worth less. For teaching you that love meant accepting whatever treatment you were given. For not fighting harder when I sensed something was wrong. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. You survived, she said softly. That's enough. But I knew it was more than survival. I'd finally learned to thrive. At 65, I was discovering life without fear. My garden bloomed. Roses, lavender, herbs I used in my own cooking. My home truly felt like mine, no longer a borrowed space. My bank account held enough for necessities and small luxuries, books, good coffee, flowers for the table. But the greatest luxury was peace, the quiet knowledge that I was safe, valued, and free. As Blaine and Sarah left that night, Blaine hugged me tight. I love you, Mom, he said. I should have said it more often. You're saying it now, I replied. That's what matters. Later, I walked through my house, turning off lights, still surprised at the comfort of simple security. On my bedside table sat a framed photo of me holding Blaine as a newborn, my face radiant with new mother joy. For years, I'd looked at pictures like that and seen only the sacrifices ahead. Now I saw something else. A woman capable of fierce love and unshakable strength. A woman who would survive whatever came next. I am still that woman, 65 years old, free at last, with grandchildren to love, a garden to tend, and a future that belongs entirely to me. It took a lifetime to learn that I was worth fighting for, but I learned it in time, and that is enough. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something that forced you to reclaim your worth? Share your story in the comments. Thank you for staying with me until the end. On the final screen, you'll find 2 more audience favorites, each with twists you won't see coming.